Global Entrepreneurship Week is now open. It has now begun. Here we go. Let's go straight into the keynote, going straight on. So we're looking at the importance of entrepreneurship in a post-COVID era and why we should be encouraging self-employment. And of course, it's always exciting, and many academics will debate this. The definitions of entrepreneurship. It's a stupidly difficult definition to go for, because everyone will say something different. So there's three definitions I want to look at. Entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial, entrepreneurism. All different things. Entrepreneurship is a contextual application of entrepreneurial characteristics and qualities, so that's applying what qualities you have. Being entrepreneurial is a state of being. For those philosophers in the room, you can really dig deep into that and go, really, what is entrepreneurial? And entrepreneurism is what I do, which is the creation of an entrepreneurial climate and support structure. And that's from Hannon 2005, and I use that definition in every slide I do. And that's just because it's quite a vague definition, so rather than arguing the many definitions we could come up with, it's just trying to come up with a vague one that we can move forwards. So there's four areas I want to look at today. We're going to start with some data, the self-employment landscape and the economic impact of self-employment in the UK, the benefits of entrepreneurship on career and self-satisfaction, future areas of research and recommendations for future support, and then the importance of entrepreneurship in a post-pandemic recovery. So let's get the worst bit out of the way, data. The self-employment landscape and the economic impact of self-employment in the UK. So the ONS reported that in Q4 of 2019, so a few years back, that was the last full quarter before the first case of COVID-19 in the UK, there was over 4.6 million self-employed individuals in the UK. This is an increase compared to the rest, and you can see it over time. It's very, very, very slowly going up. That's just showing the importance of it over time. Whereas we go during COVID, there was a decline from 4.6 million down to 4.2 million. So that's 400,000 people who've essentially lost their job, which is drastic. And you can see a slight upwards trend towards the end, and that's because the COVID relaxation rules just disappeared. So that's how things are slowly starting to come back. But if you look at the economic impact of self-employment in the UK, so employment has been on the rise steadily, with self-employment taking an increasing part of that. But employed jobs are still much higher. The UK exit from the European Union, or that's just a fancy way of saying Brexit, has seen significant impact in the UK economy, and COVID-19 has exacerbated that impact. So Brexit plus COVID is not good, to summarise that. So let's actually discuss why people should do it. Why should people do entrepreneurship? Not only for their career, but for self-satisfaction as well. And to do that, we're going to look at the determinants of self-employment. We've gone all fancy. So it's extremely important to understand what influences people to move to self-employment in order to increase and encourage entrepreneurship. So I see it in my role. It's important for me to understand why people want to do it, to try and support them the best I can. So I've gone all academic, because, you know, university, higher education, we go for that kind of thing. So Simoes et al. Identifies 7 key areas of influence. The first one is basic individual characteristics. These include gender, age, marital status, and children. Then it goes to family background, including parent, occupation, and spouse. Then it goes to personality characteristics, including attitudes towards risk, confidence, and the need for autonomy. Then we go on to human capital, including the individual's education. How does education come into play, and what experience they have through life, and how that plays in. Health conditions. So that's an area of strong debate, and it's still not very much research. Nationality and ethnicity, taking a specific look at the middleman minority theory and a discrimination hypothesis discussed in many journals, and access to financial resources. So let's take a look at what I actually mean there, because I've listed off a load of stuff that probably doesn't actually mean much. So let's start with the basic individual characteristics. This breaks down into 3 areas. So we'll start with gender. A very, very highly studied determinant, and one of the most commonly finds that women have a lower rate of engagement in self-employment than men. That's just a number. Everyone knows this. It's pretty much fact at this point. This is demonstrated through many different studies. And if we were to apply statistics to this, it works out that men are 50% more likely than women to transition into the world of self-employment. A study from Collinger et al. In 2013 found, however, women entering self-employment more and more over a steady rate. So it is becoming a more prominent part, but it's just not there yet. So we're not at an equal stage yet. We're moving on to age. So once again, going into the academic world, according to Levesque and Minity in their 2006 study looking at the effect of age on entrepreneurial venturing, their study identified an inverted U-shape based on your age. So when you're young, you'll have a higher one than if you're middle-aged, but if you're older, you've also got a higher chance of middle age. Complicated. And the reason for that is disposable income. So when you start off, you're young, you're getting your student loan. Let's say you're a student, you've got a student loan coming in April. It's a nice amount, a couple of grand coming into your account. They see that as disposable income. Not budgeting appropriately, of course, but disposable income. When you're middle-aged, you understand you've got a mortgage to pay, you've got bills to pay, it can add up quite a lot, so you don't have that disposable income you'd normally have. Whereas when you're older, you might have paid off your mortgage, depending on your budgeting. But it's all about like that middle-aged point where you actually see a downturn in the number of people starting their own business. That's backed by quite a few studies, including by I can never say his name, Gimino et al. In 1997, but that just expands on data around that time. If you looked at today's data, it's a much different scenario. Finally, marital status and children. So this is done by 3 studies I've looked at here. So Parker in 2009, Oskin in 2011, and Simoes et al. In 2016. They all emphasise that marital status does actually impact entrepreneurial intention. And that is because of the wealth of an individual. There's also that risk element. There may be that one person might want to go self-employed, while the other one wants to take a permanent job. And that's for security. So it's actually quite an interesting area to keep an eye on. It's something that's going to be increasingly looked at in research from what's been suggested. With regards to children, there's different arguments left, right and centre. They're both for the positive and for the negative. As an attempted optimist, I'll say the word attempted optimist, let's look at the positives first. It is believed that so many go into self-employment that would allow them to work from home. So because they've got kids, they can work from home, they can be there to support their children. However, there's also that alternative. If you've got kids at home and you are working from home, can you also look after your kid at the same time, especially if you've got Zoom calls or Teams meetings? You see it on time. You saw that BBC video from ages ago, where is it an MP who's talking and the child calls in and you see the nanny drag them back? That's why you can't do it at home. Yeah. So there's arguments for and against there. We look at family background. I'm an example of this study. My stepdad is self-employed. He runs his own printing firm. And I then wanted to go into self-employment myself. So that does show that there is sort of a link there. So it has been stated that growing up in an entrepreneurial family offers the opportunity to learn from self-employed individuals. So you're actually learning as you grow up. So then your mindset is, oh, I want to do this now. So it's almost like you're conditioned to enter self-employment, to enter the entrepreneurial set. There are 3 theories proposed here. First being something called positive assortive mating. Complicated. So this is when it comes to spouse. So usually when it comes to finding a partner, you go for someone of similar characteristics. So here, that's when your spouse will start to influence. It might not always be the case. But when you go into them, you might be encouraging each other to be self-employed. But there's theories of the opposite, that you're actually going to push each other away from it, because you both want to talk about security. You both want to talk about this. Entrepreneurial activity does come with some form of financial risk. It's guaranteed, near enough, unless you've got like just money for a night. So it's understanding those risks and how you discuss that in a relationship. I've gone through that, you don't need to know that bit. Parents and spouse. That's pretty much how to summarise that bit. We go on to personality characteristic. Complicated once again, because what is an entrepreneurial person? Usually it comes with someone who is happy to take risks. They're not risk averse, they won't shy away from it, they'll go for it. And it's usually someone who's creative, someone innovative, someone who can think outside the box. Or, if you're focusing more on the social entrepreneurship element, it's someone who cares for people. And that's something that's not always included in academic study, is what about those people who aren't in it for the money? What about those people who are in it for the people? And it's quite an interesting argument to look at. We look then at human capital. So, what does human capital actually mean? Education and experience. A person's education can impact their entrepreneurial intention, and the reason for that being is that they feel educated, so they're confident, and they're confident to do what they want. Whereas those people who may not have much experience in it might be a bit more risk averse, they might not want to go towards it. And that's just natural, like, how the head works. Same for experience. Those with more experience are going to more likely want to start their own version. Going on to health condition. So the literature on the effects of poor health, so illness or disability, on the decision of self-employment entry is very, very scarce. There's not much to it. There's a few papers. However, the literature that does exist creates two contradictory arguments. So this is why it might be an interesting area for someone to research in the future. So some show that those with poor health, some have a higher correlation of entering self-employment. And the question of that is, are they doing that because they feel they'll be less discriminated against under an employer? Do they feel like they can control their own workload? They can do what they want. Whereas when they're in a workplace, they might have to conform to health policies and so on. So it actually does create a confusing conversation. Some might go, there's a negative correlation there because they've got security, they've got financial security, they can get paid sick leave, they can get this. So there's those sort of opposite arguments, and literature says very different things. So that's a determinant that isn't much considered yet, but it is a determinant of self-employment. We go on to nationality and ethnicity. So the above average opt-in by immigrants is a widely accepted and much studied fact that there is currently more ongoing research focusing on two specific areas. So there's two questions to nationality and ethnicity in self-employment. Is why natives and immigrants have different propensities, I say that word, I wrote this word and I can't even say it, to self-employment, and why self-employment rates differ between different groups of immigrants from different countries. So how does that work? It's very different from different locations. So the number two here also, for some reason, has a recurring factor because there's two critical theories to these sort of questions. The first one being the middleman minority theory. So the middleman minority theory is, in essence, a person who will move to a country but has no intention of staying there. Because they will jump around more, because they will find they've got more opportunity jumping around than staying in one place. The second theory is what's called the discrimination hypothesis, which breaks down into three areas. So you've got employer discrimination, credit market discrimination, and consumer discrimination. But some are actually positive and some are negative. So it's quite odd that they've labelled three discriminations, but some do good, some do bad. So it's quite interesting to argue that. The first form is employer discrimination. So the hypothesis shows that they want to avoid discrimination due to their nationality. Unfortunately, it's an unconscious bias sometimes. People may discriminate on nationality, it happens. We're human, things happen, and sometimes it's not nice out there. So it's trying to consider that some people have that mindset that they're worried to enter employment because of their nationality. So they'll go self-employed to avoid that discrimination. The second area is credit market discrimination. And it's founded in the theory that those from different countries may will be less likely to achieve a higher loan from the bank. This is academic literature, this isn't a fact from me, this is academic literature. So it's quite interesting that people will avoid self-employment because they're scared that they won't get enough capital to keep it going. And that's a sad fact, unfortunately. And then we move on to the third and final one, which is consumer discrimination. This was new to me until I read it. So this is the theory that those of a majority group will be unlikely to buy from those of a minority group just out of basic unconscious bias, unless they're charging less than a normal majority group. So that's quite an interesting, and I do want to research this more because I found that very interesting when I read it. There's one additional hypothesis, which was in 1980s. I call it additional because I don't really see it, there's not much fact to it yet, and it's called the enclave hypothesis. So it's a theory that there's certain areas, this study was done in the United States, so it might not be same as the UK. It's a theory that there's certain areas that have more likelihood of people of different nationalities living together. And it's a theory that because they live together, they're encouraging each other to enter self-employment. And they'll support each other more. So there's that theory, and there's not much evidence to it yet, but there will be in the future, hopefully. And that's something that's also I want to look into in the future. Yep, I've skipped the animations. Finally, we're looking at the access to financial resources. It's a fact proven that it takes financial resources to get started. Not meaning, in the strictest sense, cash. You don't have to be given cash to get started. You could be given something in kind. You could be getting support. So it's those kind of things where it's access to this. And this is where it lays into all 7 determinants here. Because one person might not have much finance behind them because of background, so they might have different class. They might not have those connections, they might be discriminated against, so they don't actually get as much capital to get started. It's these things that actually all tie into each other. And I've sort of copped out a bit here, and I've put, due to time restraints today, I won't go into quantitative studies. And the reason for that being is because I can't stand quantitative studies. So I have managed to avoid the responsibility of sitting through data. So we move on to the next bit here, which is future areas of research and recommendations for future support. It is part of my career goal personally, to look more into research and to try and get involved in more academic research. So this is where I came with a bit of areas I'd like to look in. So access to increased capital support for women and women of colour. I had a discussion the other day with Diana Fricker from the Inspiration Space, who presented some real surprising numbers to me, that women, and specifically women of colour, are almost 75% less likely to achieve capital to get going. And that's a really upsetting fact, because we're in the 21st century. Should we really be at this anymore? Really? And how does poor health impact entrepreneurial intention? And then I put 2 enter spaces here, because this is something I particularly want to study, and I'm applying for a course next year to do it, is how does passion play into entrepreneurial intention and entrepreneurial success? So is there a difference between passion for entrepreneurship or a passion for the product or service? And how does that actually lead to success? That's an area I'd like to research. I'll be applying to some courses next year to do that. So now I want to look at the importance of entrepreneurship in a post-pandemic recovery. So the impact of COVID-19 on the world. Over a few months, this is specifically looking at tourism. Destinations worldwide shifted from mass tourism to no tourism at all. We shut borders and said that's it. Tourism stops now. And it's widely recognised, on top of the health crisis and the human tragedy of COVID-19, that the pandemic has triggered one of the most serious economic crises in a century. But how can we get out of this? It's quite a difficult question. It's quite a global question. Given it's Global Entrepreneurship Week, it's quite fitting. How can entrepreneurship play its part? And that's through innovative solutions. It sounds like I'm now giving a sales pitch, I'm not. So innovative solutions, so with these innovative solutions, they'll increase employment, they'll increase people engaging. We can work on reducing the climate impact alongside that. It's currently COP26 and the Global Entrepreneurship Network is present at COP26, so it's quite important that I do mention this. And then increasing supplies. I'm sure you're currently aware, most places in the UK are currently having supply shortages, the university being one of them. And you see it on the shelves all the time, things are missing. And this is where entrepreneurship needs to play its part. Finding new ways to solve problems that we're currently experiencing. And trying to motivate the next generation to fix that. I mean, we should also be fixing it, but also the next generation will be working on this problem. And probably the generation after that. And probably the generation after that. So it's going to be quite a few generations to go until we can say we're getting there. For now, we deal with what the politicians say and saying, we'll do it later. So it's trying to say we will commit to doing these, we will action this. We won't just do it, we will action this. And something else, and this is just something that I see quite a lot of innovative solutions doing, is just makes life that little easier. So little things that just make life that little easier, like when Facebook came to be. everyone then, it was barely texting at the time. People were just getting into it again. So social media was new, it was big for the world. It's like, you saw how quickly it spread worldwide. It made life a little bit easier to connect. And that's what we need to be encouraging of the next generation, is how they can make life a little easier. And how we can make it easier for our next generation. I won't say when I have kids. It's a scary thought. But making life easier for the next generation